Let us read chapter 8 of our NTT book, that is Methods of Child Study. The transformation of an infant, totally dependent on adults, into an independent person with complex abilities has always attracted much attention. There are many early accounts recorded as baby biographies by different scholars of how many children learn. Charles Darwin, working on biological diversity, wrote a book on the origin of species and also documented his son's acquisition of language. Many years later, Piaget provided a deep understanding of emergence of thought and language in children by observing and keeping detailed of his children. He later talked to children at a play to understand development of morality in childhood. Research and study of human development. Research with children builds our understanding of their behavior, nature of responses, and ways in which they learn or why they ask questions. We may believe children behave in a particular manner, but in our interactions with them in varied situations, we may be surprised to find that they are different from what we had thought. Types of research design: cross sectional research, longitudinal research, case study, and experimental design. Cross sectional research is a way of collecting data from a group of people of different ages at a particular time. This group is matched for all features such as socioeconomic status and educational background. This type of research is quick as the data is gathered at one point of time. Longitudinal research. It is a study of research issues called collecting information from a set of people at different intervals of time over a decided period. To study the selected problem, the sample is followed over time and data is gathered from the same set of participants at different points of time. Even though rich and useful information is gathered, such studies are expensive and difficult to sustain. Case study. It is an in depth study of individuals, groups, or institutions. This kind of study is done using several techniques. In the case study approach, both standardized as well as other techniques of study can be used. Experimental design. It is a research design in which two or more groups are compared under similar conditions, where each group may get a different treatment or intervention. For example, in the experimental design involving two groups, the group which receives the intervention is called the control group, and the other group under study which does not receive the intervention is called the experimental group. Tools and techniques of study. Selecting a tool. Once the basic design is decided, the next step is to identify the method for data collection. This method would be decided keeping in mind the age, educational background, and the nature of the research problem. A good tool must possess certain characteristics discussed below: reliability, validity, standardization. Reliability implies that, on repeated use, tools should give consistent or stable results. For example, the results obtained from the tool should remain the same regardless of the time of the administration of the tool and the researcher. Validity. This refers to the fact that the tool should assess or measure what it is supposed to measure and not something else. For example, a test of intelligence should be meaningful for intelligence and not some other quality. Standardization. It is a process of establishing the reliability and validity of the tool by administering it on a large population. This means that the test has to be administered and scored in a consistent manner for the entire population. Next is observation. Observation being directly observing behavior with the purpose of describing it in his or her presence. Audiovisual devices may also be used for recording the observations. There are two types of observations, which are participant and non participant observations, and structured and unstructured observations. Participant observation takes place when an observer participates with children and in the events being observed. Non participant observation occurs when an observer observes events without interacting with the children being observed. Structured observation is a technique in which an observer observes events using a guide that has been planned in advance. Unstructured observation is a technique in which an observer observes and record behavior in a holistic way without the use of predetermined categories or guide. Everything that happens on the setting is recorded. Advantages of observation method. It provides direct information about behavior of individuals and groups. It is possible to obtain information where laboratory experiments cannot be conducted. It helps to develop a holistic perspective. Disadvantages of observation method. It is expensive and time consuming. Selective perception of observer may distort data. Interview. It is a technique that simply uses direct conversation with children to gather data. One person or interviewer questions the other on certain issues and then draws conclusion from these conversations. It is a detailed, in-depth conversation that is guided by certain objectives. The interview schedule is a list of questions used for interviewing. The steps in constructing and conducting an interview are: decide on an issue that you want to study and look for a suitable title. List out the areas on this issue that are important to investigate. Write down the questions, word them carefully and simply. Arrange the identified questions from simple to more complex. Prepare an introductory passage for the respondent to explain your purpose. Different types of interviews are structured interviews, semi-structured interviews, unstructured interviews. A structured interview involves the researcher asking the children a list of predetermined questions with a predefined set of answers about a carefully selected topic. Semi-structured interviews are the interviews which are conducted with a fairly open framework which allow for focused conversational two-way communication. They can be used to both to give and receive information. It contains a set of flexible questions that can be used as a guide. Unstructured interview is an informal discussion that has no strict guidelines, allowing the discussion to be open and not necessarily concise in its nature. Advantages of interviews are: interview is a powerful technique for studying in-depth issues. Questions can be reworded or repeated in case these are not understood correctly. The interviewer and interviewee can proceed at their own speed. Doubts can be clarified and further questioning can proceed in case the need arises. It can be used with illiterate participants quite easily. Disadvantages of interview. Intensive training is required to conduct interviews. Sometimes the face to face conversation can make children uncomfortable, especially with the questions that are intimate in nature. Sometimes writing and recording can make children feel conscious. Next is questionnaire. The questionnaire is a tool that uses questioning as a strategy to gather responses. It consists of a set of written questions which calls for responses on the part of individuals or the subjects. Types of questionnaires: closed ended questionnaire, open ended questionnaire. Closed ended questionnaire consists of a list of pre-decided questions with four choices. The respondent is required to choose one of the choices from the set of multiple options provided. Open-ended questionnaire consists of list of pre-decided questions where there is a scope to provide descriptive and subjective responses. Advantages of questionnaire are: administering questionnaires involves low cost and is less time consuming. Information can be collected from a large number of individuals in a relatively short period of time. Each respondent receives the same set of questions phrased in exactly the same way. Disadvantages of questionnaire: it can only be conducted with literate respondents. There is no scope to clarify meanings or explain the questions and the responses. There is no scope for follow up questions. ART as a form of communication. Artistic ART means art as a form of communication. Artistic forms of expressions such as role play and drawings can be used with children to elicit their responses. These can serve as tools to gather meaningful data on children's behaviors and thought. Let us study more about these art forms. Role play. Role play is a method in which different individuals assume a role, playing themselves or another person in a given situation or scenario based on the objectives. It is a method for exploring the issues involved in complex social situations. Drawings as source of conversation. Children from a young age like to scribble with crayons. They may use particular colors or strokes on paper. The drawings may have no concrete shape or resemblance to reality. When teachers or mothers have asked children about what they have created, there is often a meaningful narrative. Next part is reporting children's progress. Anecdotal records portfolio. Anecdotal records are detailed description of important episodes which are written and maintained on a daily basis to record children's progress over a period of time. The anecdotal records provide important periodic information of children's lives. Records may encompass many aspects of children's development, such as their behavior, interaction, interests, likes, dislikes, etc. Now it is portfolio. It is a collection of children's work which reflects their development and progress. It includes children's writing, drawings, art and craft work, activity sheets, photographs, videos, etc. It is an evidence of children's growth, development, and learning, providing a rich and comprehensive picture of a children's lives. So, this was our chapter 8. Our next chapter will be Profile of an ECCE Center.